A widow cast aside for barren womb, but the rancher with a little girl asked her to stay. The outcast widow. The train hissed into the dusty little station, its wheels screeching as it slowed. Margaret Dawson sat stiffly on the hard bench seat, her hands knotted in her lap, her dark dress wrinkled from the long journey. She carried only one bag, the last of her possessions, the rest left behind with the ashes of a life that had turned bitter. Once, she had been a wife with hope in her heart. Once, she had believed in a future filled with children's laughter and a husband's steady hand. But her husband had died of fever 3 winters ago, and long before that his family had branded her as useless. No child had ever quickened in her womb, and in their eyes that was a shame too heavy to bear. They sold her off in all but name. Let her go, she cannot give us an heir. What good is a barren woman? Her late husband's brother had spoken those words coldly, and Margaret had left their farm with nothing but dignity and a heart hardened by sorrow. Now she had come west, chasing whispers of a new beginning. Yet as she stepped down from the train, the station seemed to judge her too. Men glanced once and looked away, women in bonnets turned their shoulders. She was 30, plain, and childless. No one saw worth in a woman like her. Margaret drew her shawl tighter around her shoulders, unsure what step to take next. That was when she felt it, a tug at her skirt. She turned, startled, and found a little girl no older than 6 gazing up at her. The child's hair was a tumble of gold curls, her cheeks smudged with dust, and her blue eyes held the kind of openness only children possess. She clutched a ragged doll in one hand and Margaret's dress in the other. "Ma'am," the girl whispered. "Don't go." Margaret knelt slowly. "Why, sweetheart?" The girl's lip trembled. "Papa needs you." Before Margaret could gather her wits, a man's voice cut through the din of the station. "Clara!" The child let go of Margaret's dress and bounded toward the tall figure striding across the platform. He was broad-shouldered, sunburned from years of labor, and wore the dust of the prairie on his boots. His eyes, storm-gray and piercing, softened only when he scooped his daughter into his arms. "I told you not to run off," he scolded gently, but Clara only pointed back at Margaret. "Papa, it's her. She's the one." The man's gaze followed the little hand. When his eyes landed on Margaret, something in his expression shifted. He didn't look away. He didn't flinch. He studied her with the slow, careful measure of a man who knew what he was seeking. Margaret straightened, heat rising to her cheeks. I beg your pardon, sir. Your daughter mistook me." "No mistake," Clara interrupted firmly. "Papa, you said God would send someone to stay with us." "I think he sent her." The rancher's jaw flexed. He set Clara down and tipped his hat. "Name's Samuel Hayes. This bold little one is Clara. And you are Margaret Dawson." He nodded once, as though committing her name to memory. "You headed somewhere, Mrs. Dawson?" She hesitated. Mrs. still felt like a shackle. "Nowhere certain. I hoped to find work, a place to belong." Clara slipped her small hand into Margaret's again. "Then come with us." Samuel studied the two of them, his daughter holding fast to a stranger, the stranger meeting his gaze with wary dignity. He saw weariness etched in her features, but also a quiet strength. A woman used to carrying sorrow, yet unbroken by it. "My ranch is 3 miles out," he said finally. "I've got need of a housekeeper. Clara's got need of someone gentle. If you're willing, you could stay." Margaret's throat tightened. A barren widow, cast aside, being asked, not pitied, but asked, to stay. She whispered, "Why me?" Samuel's gray eyes softened, just barely. "Because Clara trusts you, and I've learned to trust her heart." For the first time in years, Margaret felt the faintest spark of warmth. Perhaps the journey west had not been in vain after all. She nodded. "I'll stay." Clara beamed, and Samuel offered his arm, solid and sure. Margaret took it, and together they stepped into the sunlit dust of the frontier road. The rancher's choice. The wagon wheels creaked as Samuel guided the horses away from the station, dust swirling up behind them. Margaret sat beside him on the bench seat, her bag tucked at her feet, Clara nestled happily against her side. The little girl had claimed Margaret's hand as though it belonged to her all along. The road stretched wide and lonely, prairie grass bending in the wind. Margaret kept her gaze fixed on the horizon, her heart thrumming with uncertainty. She had agreed to stay, out of gratitude, perhaps out of desperation, but the question still echoed inside her, "Why me?" Samuel broke the silence. "You came west alone." "Yes." Her voice was soft, but steady. "There was nothing left for me back east." He gave her a sidelong glance, as though weighing whether to pry further. "Family." Margaret shook her head. "My husband's kin cast me out when he passed. I was not useful to them." Samuel's jaw tightened, his hands gripping the reins with more force than necessary. "Because you bore no children." The words struck like a lash, yet there was no cruelty in his tone. Only truth. Margaret's throat closed, but she nodded. Clara stirred, frowning. "That's foolish," she declared, her child's voice fierce. "Papa says people are worth more than what they can give. Papa says we all matter." Samuel gave a short laugh, but his eyes were serious when they met Margaret's. "The girl speaks plain truth." Margaret looked away quickly, for fear he would see the ache in her eyes. The Hayes Ranch came into view near sundown, its fences stretching wide across rolling land, cattle grazing in the distance. The house was sturdy but worn, a place built by calloused hands and endurance. Inside, Margaret found rooms sparse yet neat. Samuel moved about with the air of a man used to doing everything himself, cooking, mending, caring for Clara. It was a good home, but it was lonely. That night, as Margaret helped set supper on the rough-hewn table, Clara chattered with excitement. "Papa, can she stay forever?" Samuel's fork paused midway to his mouth. His eyes flicked to Margaret, lingering there, before he answered carefully. "That depends if Mrs. Dawson wants to." Margaret's heart beat painfully. She busied herself ladling stew into Clara's bowl. "One day at a time, child," she murmured. Yet already, the thought of leaving pressed against her chest like a stone. Days turned to weeks. Margaret found herself woven into the fabric of the ranch with surprising ease. She rose early to tend the kitchen, baked bread that filled the house with warmth, and taught Clara letters by the lamplight at night. Samuel worked from dawn to dusk, but he began to pause more often, lingering on the porch where Margaret read stories aloud to Clara. Sometimes she caught him watching her, not with pity, not with judgment, but with something she dared not name. Still, whispers followed her in town. At the general store, two women muttered within earshot. "That's her. The widow who can't bear children. Poor man Hayes. Taking in such a woman. Foolish, if you ask me." Margaret kept her chin high, but their words stung deep. She carried the shame back to the ranch like an invisible weight. That evening, Samuel found her scrubbing dishes with trembling hands. "What's wrong?" he asked. "Nothing," she replied quickly. "Margaret." His voice was low, firm, the kind of voice that expected truth. She turned to him, bitterness spilling before she could stop it. "They're right, you know. I can give you nothing. No children. No legacy. Why burden yourself with me?" For a long moment, Samuel said nothing. Then he stepped closer, his eyes burning steady into hers. "You think I brought you here for children?" Margaret's breath hitched. "I already have a daughter," he continued, his voice rough with feeling. "What I don't have is a partner. A friend. Someone who can stand beside me, who can care for Clara when the nights are long. You've given us more in weeks than I could have hoped for in years. Don't you dare call that nothing." Tears blurred Margaret's vision. She had braced for rejection, for cold truth. But what he offered instead was something she had almost forgotten existed: acceptance. Samuel reached out then, hesitant at first, and brushed a tear from her cheek with a rough pad of his thumb. "I don't want what the world says makes a woman whole. I want you." The silence between them grew thick, charged. Margaret's heart pounded so loud she thought he must hear it. It was Clara who broke the moment, bounding in with a giggle. "Papa, Mrs. Dawson, come see the stars." Samuel stepped back, his hand lingering a second longer before falling away. Margaret steadied herself, her heart still trembling. Autumn settled over the land. Margaret and Samuel grew accustomed to one another's rhythms, their lives intertwining in unspoken ways. He left coffee ready for her in the mornings. She mended his shirts with care. The bond between them deepened not in grand gestures but in small, steady kindnesses. And yet, the unspoken question lingered, what were they to one another? One evening, after Clara had gone to bed, Margaret found Samuel on the porch, staring out at the fields under a sky scattered with stars. She hesitated in the doorway, then stepped beside him. The night air was crisp, the silence comfortable. "Do you regret asking me to stay?" she asked quietly. He turned to her, eyes shadowed in the starlight. "Every day I thank God I did." Her breath caught. He reached for her hand, this time without hesitation. "Margaret," he said, voice deep and steady, "I don't care what the world says. I don't care what you think you lack. You are the woman I want by my side. Will you be my wife?" The question hung in the night, heavy with promise. Margaret's heart swelled, breaking open all the years of rejection and shame. She saw the truth in his eyes. This was not charity nor pity. It was love, quiet and fierce. Her voice trembled, but her answer was certain. "Yes." Samuel exhaled, relief softening his strong features. He pulled her gently into his arms, holding her as though she had always belonged there. For the first time in years, Margaret felt whole. From the doorway, Clara peeked out, a grin spreading across her little face. "I knew it," she whispered to her doll. "Papa needed her. And she needed us. The Hayes Ranch would never be lonely again."